the case study in art history. And we're going to have two presenters and also plenty of group for Q&A. So before they come to the front, let me introduce each of them right next to one another so that the talks can take place in a row straight away. And then we have a Q&A. So the first speaker is Charlotte Rulkens, who's an art historian and curator specialized in Dutch 17th century painting. You'll find a more detailed biography also in the booklet. To keep everybody's attention going, I tend to ask speakers for something about themselves that few people in the room would know. So here's what Charlotte said in reply to that question. Ever since she was a child, she's been obsessed with means of transportation. In particular, cars and boats. She loves TV shows like Railway and would love to sail around the world one day. She was born in Leiden and as a young adult moved to Amsterdam, just like himself. Then our second speaker is Jürgen Wadem, who was full professor in conservation and restoration at the Faculty of Humanities at the University of Amsterdam and is director of Wadem Art Technological Studies and a specialty advisor of Dutch and Flemish art at the Nika Art collection. What most of you won't know about him is that he started out as a flower painter at the Royal Copenhagen Porcelain Factory. But then a sudden event radically changed his life and he was propelled into art history and paintings conservation, hence his presence today. And if you would like to know more about that single event, you can ask him yourself because it's too long to present here today. So Charles, why don't you go first?
Thank you very much, Nick. What I've learned so far in working on replication study is that talking about replication generally for the layman, as I started, needs a lot of stage setting. And talking about replication studies on a painting that is replicated makes it even more challenging. But I'm very happy today to tell you about the current case study in replication in the humanities we're working on.
Can you just use the arrows from the...
I think the clicker doesn't work anymore since we changed the screen mode.
All right. This mode of transportation here I will use to... Yes, there we are. I will do so by first tell you about the aims of this study shortly and delve into the original study we're talking about, the methods for replication we're using, and some of the preliminary reflections I have, because you must know that we're in the midst of carrying out this replication and part of it is still has to be conducted. So it's in some ways premature. Before ending with our team and partners. So the aim of the Replicating a Rembrandt study is to explore the strengths and limitation of replication in the humanities by aiming to execute a replication study in the field of art history. And the study that is our focus here concerns two portraits of the young Rembrandt. And before I delve into those, I will tell you a little bit more about how attribution generally work in art history. So let's see, we have a painting and we wonder who's made it. Then there are two pillars that you actually look at as an art historian. The first is that you read, as it were, the object. And that means that you delve into with different techniques and methods into different aspects of the object. And the second is that you read the context of this object. Reading the object itself means studying its support, the buildup of paint layers, the use of materials, the handling of the paint, the signature, is it there or not, and changes that the painting underwent over time due to different causes. Reading the context means that you look at the provenance of an artwork and that you look at the oeuvre that you suspect it might be part of. In doing so, and as it were building these different aspects of evidence you triangulate in your research, because you have different aspects you look at in building your case. And it's important to know that you also integrate the different findings that you have on the different aspects of this artwork. And even more important is that these days, this is very much teamwork, because you need different kinds of specialisms within art history to really come to a funded conclusion. So back to these two portraits. The portrait at the left is a portrait of the young Rembrandt, which is currently in the collection of the Mauritshuis in The Hague. The one at the right is in the collection of the Germanisches Nationalmuseum in Nuremberg. For years and years and years, the painting at the left was considered to be one of the finest examples of early Rembrandt self-portrait. The painting at the right was considered to be a copy of this painting made during the days that in the studio of Rembrandt, so a contemporary copy by one of his students. And when the original research took place in the 1990s, the painting at the right actually was in the depot of the museum because it was not considered apparently that interesting. Until the Mauritshuis in the 90s started to prepare for an exhibition on Rembrandt's self-portrait. And in preparation of this exhibition, they carried out technical research to the painting on the left. And they also applied infrared reflectography, which is a technique which enables you to look under the paint layers of the painting. And to everyone's surprise, they found an underdrawing in this painting. And you can see it here in the sharp lines. This is in the hair and in the clothes and at other spaces. This is the underdrawing I'm talking about. Underdrawings upon that moment were not known to be a thing that Rembrandt used in building up his paintings. And in addition to that, an underdrawing can indicate that an image is transferred from one support to another. Another argument that was used is that the way this underdrawing was made was not really considered to be Rembrandt-esque. So everyone was puzzled, and the research developed, and there are actually so they researched it further. And as part of the exhibitions, the paintings were brought together and examined by a group of experts who compared the two works. And in this comparison, all the experts present agreed that actually that solution should be the other way around. Not the painting in the Mauritshuis is the Rembrandt painting, but that one in the Germanisches Nationalmuseum. And the other painting was now considered a painting made in Rembrandt's studio. And as you can imagine, well, first to add to that, just to summarize, because it's impossible to summarize the whole research here, the aspects that were important in this argumentation was the buildup of the paint layers, and among them, the underdrawing that was found, and the handling of the paint, of course, these researchers looked at. There was a signature that was overlooked for years and years and years at the Germanisches Nationalmuseum painting, which was put to the attention again. And of course, the oeuvre of Rembrandt was studied to see if the painting would fit in it or not. And as you can imagine, this stirred a lot of attention because it was actually one of the first examples of a museum de-attributing its own Rembrandt. So it got a lot of attention in the press. So the research questions that were central to the original study actually is the Hague version painted by Rembrandt or not? Is the Nuremberg version painted by Rembrandt or not? And which of the paintings was painted first and was the primal version? And this study was carried out by technical research into both paintings and a live comparison by experts. So this is the core we're working with in this replication and that we're replicating right now. So our approach for the replication, I will shortly go over. First, we went to the reconstruction of the study, and we wanted to reconstruct in detail how the study took place. And since there was no study of protocol, we had to look at different sources, museum archives and documentation. But also, we were very happy to be able to interview the original researchers in order to do so. and really looked thoroughly at publications that were published at the time. And in this reconstruction, immediately some of the challenges came up. The nature of the study is very specific. The study started because of an unexpected finding, which was done in the research in preparation for an exhibition. So it's not the typical university environment in which the study started. It also had different aims, an exhibition catalog to publish it. So that was different. So in a museum setting, not everything of the study, as in a lot of studies is the case, was documented. And also the publication, the research was published in different kind of articles, so by different authors. So it's kind of fragmented, and you ask yourself the question, what is really the core of the study we're talking about here? So we defined 2 publications, and the original studies researchers are here by Edwin Buys and Jeroen Baden as core of this replication study. So in replicating, we're following the definitions put forward by Pils and Bouter in 2018 that you by now probably know quite well. 3 forms of replication. But before starting working with this framework designed by them, I thought we first have to know, if you talk about changing protocols, what are you actually changing? And in research in art history, but maybe the humanities in general, talking about data, sources, methods is not a very common thing to do. So what we did is define those terms for this study. So a source could be a painting, archival source, literature. The methods could be both the technical methods as a literature study or archival study, or a naked eye observation. And the data could be technical data, but also description of observations, information in archival sources or literature. And this all is embedded in the study plan, and the sequence of the study is important there as well. And after doing so, we could decide what we would opt for. And we opted to do both a reproduction and a conceptual replication, and leave out the direct replication. And that is the reason was time and means. In theory, we could get the old infrared equipment out of the basement and put it in paintings again, but that would only rule out small mistakes that might have been made in the measurement of the paintings, but not crucial things for our conclusions. And the other idea was that whilst conducting a reproduction and a conceptual replication, in case the reproduction would be successful, that would enable to have more conclusions about the outcomes of the conceptual replication, because you can compare. So here to summarize again, in the middle, the aspects, the methods that are part of the reproduction, staying very close to original study, and at the outer area, the techniques that came in as part of the conceptual replication. And as you can see, as you move further to the conceptual replication, you get into a gray area, because when are you starting actually a new independent research? Another aspect to note here is that the expert meeting that was part of the original study is now carried out as part of the conceptual replication, because we decided to design it in a different way than in the original study. And it was not possible to both do an expert meeting with a reproduction in mind and do another one with a conceptual replication in mind. So this new expert meeting was really a chance to explore an expert meeting as a research tool, as a consensus making method. And here the interdisciplinary character of our team really comes up hand in designing this. We also decided to invite independent experts and an independent chair to chair this session, and to let them jointly agree on the protocol we are working through whilst looking at those 2 paintings together, which are brought together again to compare. And we try to mitigate biases as far as possible and enhance the possibility for replicability by document the session with forms and recordings. And this is going to take place next week, so very exciting. So we're in the midst of it, as I mentioned, but there are some preliminary things that we came across while conducting this study. Not only might replication tell us more about the trustworthiness of the original findings, but I find it has lots of collateral, which I call collateral advantages, which is that for me, it really is, I see it as a didactic exercise because I had to really thoroughly study this study carried out 20 years ago, which makes you think about the way these kinds of studies are set up and from which you really learn. It also adds to the historiography of the original study in reconstructing what happened at the time. It really stresses, enables awareness of biases that might be at play at questions like this and the way you can mitigate those. And it makes you think about the improvement of common practices. What do we normally do in art history when we have these attributions questions, and how could we improve? And another collateral advantage is thinking about open science is the pre-registration and the documentation of the study. Can we be as transparent as possible, and how can we improve that? But of course, there are also limitations, we know. And one of the most important thing is that I think is that you quickly in designing a study start to compromise in terms of practicalities, time, mean, location. This is a very time-consuming and a complicated endeavor. But also theoretically, of course, we have new researchers with different backgrounds, different amounts of experience, which move in a different kind of time frame. And over time, knowledge to the field has added. And although compromises are not necessarily damaging your replication, the more you have, the more chances of variables you have. And it gets more and more difficult, I think, to identify reasons why you might or might not come to the same conclusion. So to extend the figure I showed you before is that we do not only talk about changes in source, metadata, and protocol, but also in researchers and moment in time. And in addition to that, we have the aspect of biases that play in the original study, both as in the new study. And those factors in the study are all sort of black boxes that you really don't know what happens there in the minds of the researchers in the original study and in a new study, but also not only in biases and the researchers, for example, also the connoisseurship, of course. Another thing that plays in this study is group dynamic, and not only socially, but also dynamic of connoisseurship might play a role here. But also, for example, naked eye observations. Is it even possible to make an objective description of a painting because you are dependent of your eyesight? And the sequence and study plan, as we discussed, not everything is documented, even from this replication in which we really try to do so. Not everything will be clear in 10 years what we did. So in addition to that, insights in the process, and this is something we knew from early on, that this is actually a hybrid case study. We work with quite technical data, both, but also more traditional connoisseurship and art history plays a role. I find defining terminologies is very helpful in doing this work in humanities or art history. Even though we're not used to it, it helps also in articulating and reporting your study. And another option, and I don't know if this would be, you really would want it, but you might think of differentiating between the one designing a replication study and the one conducting it. Because if you're the person reconstructing this study into detail and person carrying it out at the same time, you get influence. That's something that you cannot avoid, I think. It's also a question of what kind of studies do you choose? And whilst talking about these black boxes, it might be that you want to focus on important studies, but also studies that focus on primary sources, just to avoid those layers of interpretation which get mixed up very easily whilst replicating. And choose, well, ideally have a well-defined study that is really clear-cut with a head and a tail, which in this study was a challenge to really see, okay, what is the study we're actually looking about, and when does it start and when does it end? So as I told you, we work with very different expertise in this team, and wanted to thank everyone on the team by ending this. And as you can see, one of the original researchers is part of our team, Edwin Buijsen, who's here today as well. We're very happy for that. And both the advisory committee wanted to thank as well, and Professor Jeroen Wadem is here as well, also one of the original researchers. So I'm very excited to hear your thoughts. You can find more on the pre-registration, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.